So this next guest over here, I met this gentleman at the Rebels for a Cause in person, Rebels for a Cause event, which was great, which is an event where people are going for they're trying to obtain personal sovereignty through art and literature and all that other stuff. And it was thrown by our good friend Courtney Turner, and just an awesome event. And I got to hang out with this guy, and we got to meet Frank Stallone. I think I appeared with him on an episode of Union of the Unwanted before that, so I did have some history with him. Ladies and gentlemen, the author of the book School World Order is joining us here today on the Homeless to Go show. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, we met Frank Stallone in Tennessee. John Klyczek is with us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Pasta. It's good to see you.
So now I just realized I spelled your name wrong. I spelled it C-H-E-K, not C-Z-E-K. I spelled your goddamn name wrong. It was on the thing. We got to correct it, John. John is a former MMA wrestler fighter, right? Yeah. We talked about that too. And now he writes books, and he's an educator as well, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A little bit of back. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we got about 45 minutes left of the show, so we got to dive right into the meat and potatoes of what's going on. You wrote a book called School World Order. I got to see a whole presentation on it. It just blew my mind. But first, let's dissect this from the white belt level for the macaroni and cheese watchers out there who aren't too complicated in their pastas or in their karate yet. They're at that first level. You put up some articles talking about school choice that you had sent over to me. What exactly is school choice? Why is it an important conversation? And it's been demonized in my neck of the woods where me and Matt are. When we're in California, school choice, you're evil. Oh, my God. You want to make sure that only white kids get an education and everybody else gets left behind. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts about school choice and how it's going around in all these other – it's coming up to a vote in all these states. And what are the pros and cons of school choice? Go ahead, buddy.
So school choice, you can it's sort of an umbrella term for several privatization schemes, more or less. Okay, so this includes charter schools, which are private companies that are subsidized by public tax dollars. Then you have voucher systems, which basically it's like a coupon that you can get federal or state dollars to subsidize either private education or a charter school, or with those are usually for private or charter. Then you have education savings accounts, and these are similar, except instead of sort of like a coupon, it's going to go into a government account, and you can use this money, again, this tax dollars, to subsidize either a private school. It could be a religious or parochial school, could be a public-private charter school, or if you like another public school that's not in your district, you could also use it for that. And then you have another one called tax credits for tuition, which is basically you put the money up front for any of those other options, and then the government will basically give you a tax break based on that. So it's a basket of various privatization schemes. And sort of the way that it's being pitched right now, the pros and cons would be that the main one is that if you're on the pro charter school side, is that you're funding students instead of buildings, or people instead of institutions. And the argument is that by letting the student, the family, take that money and go where they want, that you could basically you could decrease socioeconomic disparities that are basically lock people into the schools in their districts. But on the other side of the argument, there's an argument that actually it could exacerbate those socioeconomic disparities in terms of how school choice is being promoted right now. The charter school business is largely sort of locked in, right? This charter schools goes way back. It was founded by the concept was formulated by who was the president of the American Federation of Teachers, which is the second largest teachers union in the nation. That was Albert Shanker. And then the first federal charter school bill was actually put in by Bill Clinton. And then it's, at this point, charter schools are more or less ubiquitous. You're not going to find a state where there's not a charter school. So the big push for school choice now is really those other options that I mentioned. So the voucher programs, the education savings accounts, and the tax credits for tuition. And one of the ways that it's sort of being leveraged on the right at this moment does actually have to do with sort of the idea that, well, if you let the students or the parents go where they want, they can get away from all of the woke stuff and the critical theory stuff. So that's sort of how it's being promoted. So let me just pause there. Maybe you want to jump in.
Matt, do you have any questions, or should I just go right into it?
Well, I mean, yeah, no, I'm learning about this. So you're saying that the vessel in order to get people excited about this is, hey, we're going to give you guys that. So the word choice comes up where you can choose what you want to do in this, especially in a climate that's so divisive now. So this is like kind of the opportune time to get people on board for this. But we're really taking the kind of the taxpayers' money, and it's kind of being funneled into like these private companies. It's just another one of these things. That's kind of my first thought on it. Is that it seems like this isn't going to end well if it continues. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's largely the idea. So essentially you're going to be subsidizing. So the argument against sort of how this may or may not increase or decrease socioeconomic disparities. People who are on the side that think it will increase the socioeconomic disparities. The idea here is that so if it's an education savings account or a voucher, certainly an education savings account, that students who already are of wealthy families, they can get some of that money too. So you can actually subsidize their private education. Now, if you look at something like there's the Alabama Choose Act. The Choose Act stands for Creating Hope and Opportunity for Our Students' Education. They're proposing ESAs, education savings accounts, that you could get up to $7,000 for a participating school for the tuition, and that would be either an accredited private school, could be a religious or parochial school, or it could also be an accredited public school, but it could also be a public charter school, which is a public-private partnership. And then on the other end, you could get $2,000 to subsidize homeschool, and then that would basically pay for under Section 2.10G of the bill, the Choose Act. It could subsidize educational software and applications. So you're subsidizing private ed tech corporations. But the idea here is that, right, a lot of the best, I guess you would say, right, some of those private schools, right, the tuition is much more than $7,000, right? And so that money would probably subsidize the wealthy people, right? So they're paying less for the private schools, and people who, right, are of a lower socioeconomic bracket, they get that $7,000, and they might have some other options, and maybe it's a better school, but there's certainly not enough money there so that everybody's going to get the choice in terms of any school they want, right? And so the argument there is that could actually exacerbate those disparities, while actually at the same time bringing in government federal regulations over private schools. And so there could actually be problems I could critique this from the right or the left, right? From the right-wing perspective, right? People want to keep their private school sort of unadulterated, but that's going to bring in federal regulations. And then on the other side, right, this idea that you're going to have choice, but that choice is not actually going to, go to sort of the underserved communities.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about how this system works, you mentioned $7,000, right? Is the system itself, different in every state, county, and whatnot? I mean, how does it work? Because I heard, like in California, that you can get a stipend if you choose not to put your kids in the educational system in Los Angeles. You get a certain amount of money from the state, and you can use that money. Choose that money. The school choice comes is that the parents get to choose where they spend that money for that child. How does it differ from state to state? And is there some states that give you a better opportunity for choice than some of the other? In other words, you're telling me $7,000. I don't think that's going to do a lot for one child in 1 year. So how does it differ from state to state, and how does this actually work?
Well, it differs in the sense that they might offer either education savings accounts, tax credits for tuition, or vouchers. I mean, that's one difference right away, right? So the mechanism could be different. The amount of money could be different. The types of regulations that come along with it could be different. In Kentucky, there's a ballot initiative, and there's an amendment on it for a school choice program, and that's not actually ironed out yet, right? And so basically, depending on how that initiative goes, the language is such that it's proposing that the pathways for choice would be determined by the localities or the state or the family, so to speak, would choose sort of whether they want to emphasize vouchers, ESAs, TCTs, etc. And then, I imagine the money would be negotiable or as they iron out the actual legislation. In Texas, the reason why you also asked, why is this important now? Because this is really a big voting wedge issue. And sort of the Republican Party at large, this is a big part of their platform. And you have Governor Greg Abbott in Texas. You have Governor Bill Lee in Tennessee, just as two examples who, during this primary, they're sort of vetting or endorsing only candidates that will back their school choice agenda. And it's interesting to note that Greg Abbott, well, he's proposing that his school choice platform, and it seems like the people he's endorsed, the pro school choice people, are largely going to get in. So it looks like he's pretty much going to be able to get this done. But he's also proposing that he's going to remove property tax funding for education, and he's going to replace it with other forms of revenue. So for those who don't know, in most states, your state property tax is the primary means of funding education. So you remove that and you go, where does that money going to come from? Well, there's also a federal bill that's sort of waiting to get pushed forward. And I imagine if the Republicans win, that this is going to be pushed through in the House come next year. And it's called the Educational Choice for Children Act. And so it looks to me that, well, let me explain a little bit how it works. But before I do, that looks like where Abbott intends to get this extra money from, right? And so in other words, you're asking how things are different at the state level. That's sort of setting up kind of the infrastructure at the local and state level, but it looks like it's primed to be integrated with this federal ECCA bill. And the interesting thing about this one is that it'll give you federal income taxes to individuals and organizations that donate to nonprofit organizations called scholarship granting organizations, SGOs. And then the SGOs are going to be the ones that decide how to dole out the grants to the parents to cover private education, including educational therapies and educational technologies. And so even in this federal bill, right, you basically have a basket of nonprofit companies that are actually going to be in charge of who gets this money. So even that has this federal bill it's sort of a federal public-private partnership between these SGOs and the federal government.
This is, as I'm trying to process this, John, I'm going to say the language is everything, right? So you can take the language and give the right word, the right verbiage to the right wing, and you're going to give them that adrenaline rush of, oh, this is the way out of the problem with the schools right now. This is the way out. This is giving us choice. So you say freedom. So freedom is a key word. Freedom. But what you just described is kind of the opposite of that, because you're having this kind of team up, this kind of evil team up between the state and you have the nonprofit corporations, but corporate, it's corporatism. This is corporatism. This is the merging of the state and the corporations to give us something that we're going to call free, but it's just another, they're just recycling the same garbage we already have and getting us excited about it, but they're still going to control everything. And then you're going to have this class divide, and classism will be, I think, the biggest problem from this, with this guise that we got our freedom for how we want our kids to be educated, because our school system has collapsed as is. It is a joke. The school system is a problem, but this doesn't seem like the way to solve it. This is making it worse. We're not actually solving the problem. That's kind of my take on it. Is that where you seeing people stand, or are you, the people you're engaging with, are they saying, no, this is a good thing that we give that freedom to the families, to the kids?
Well, I float around in a lot of different circles. So, there's some people that are, I am not school choice. Most of my book, the first several chapters, emphasizes sort of the dangers of corporatization through the various public, private, charter schooling and other school choice schemes. I actually, you mentioned Courtney Turner. She was trying to stop a bill in Tennessee. I believe they were successful. And I actually dug up a bunch of files from my mentor, Charlotte Thompson Iserby, who worked for the Department of Education. And she had a whole archive of stuff that she gave me, and a bunch of it was on school choice. So I did a little presentation for her to try to help convince a lot of the people, because it's a red state. A lot of the red state people, right? I mean, they're so averse to all things woke and critical theory that they want anything that's not that. Any option that is proposed that will get them out of that system, purportedly, they'll run with it, right? And they often are like, they want to get out of the government schools. And my argument is that you're not getting out of the government schools. What you're doing is you're allowing the federal government to tie strings to the private schools, to the parochial schools, to the home schools. And so essentially the goal here is to create one system, one public, private, corporate, technocratic system. And so that is the danger. And they're using this culture war leverage point to ram it through.
Wow. It's kind of genius. It's kind of genius for them.
All right. So that's a little curveball for me, because you said you're not for school choice, and I thought you would be for school choice, right? It's crazy, because I thought you would, because I thought, when you talked about the national system and wanting to escape that, let's talk a little bit about that, because obviously a lot of the curriculum comes from the county, sometimes the state, but you said this is kind of like national. When you talk about school world order, right? It seems like there's this kind of like national oligarchic ruling class plan on how to program our children, right? How to indoctrinate them young and early. Tell us a little bit about school world order, what that means, and if in fact school choice isn't the way to get out of this, how do we get away from this programming that's coming from up on high, from oligarchs and the ruling class?
Yeah, so the book, we could lay it out pretty simply. The first, it's in two sections, okay? And the first one is looking at all the various public-private corporatization schemes. The only one that we would add to that would be community schooling, which is sort of like a left-wing counterpart to charter schooling. And that, by the way, they have community charter schools. All community school means is that the public-private partnerships come through wraparound services, and the wraparound services are partnerships between the school and either healthcare. They have to provide healthcare, workforce training, and then they have criminal justice interventions. And so they have public-private partnerships through various nonprofits and corporations that facilitate those. And so the second half of the book looks at the ways that the privatization scheme facilitates the technologies that are going to be used to psychologically condition students, data mine them to build AI, and then basically build social credit databases that would basically determine the students' access not to jobs in the workforce or even higher education, but transportation, healthcare, housing, you name it. And so school choice is not the way out, because it's basically it's actually building the corporate infrastructure and enabling the technology companies to come in. Actually, it's the charter schooling movement, it's the school choice movement that largely opened the gates for the technologies to come in and data mine students. So the very first virtual charter school was set up by Bill Bennett. It's K-12 Inc. It's still around. It's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the country. And it's through these types of virtual online charter schools. They provided the first platforms where you could have an LMS, a learning management system, and basically you could integrate into that platform things known as adaptive learning courseware, that are the screen-based technologies that data mine student psychometrics, and it's the feedback loop built in the adaptive learning courseware that's now basically been evolved into sort of the GPT, or the generative AI, that's being promoted for tutoring and all sorts of automated feedback. So the only option really to get out of the system is ultimately a homeschooling option, a pod or a co-op in your neighborhood that does not take federal or state dollars and does not integrate virtual online corporate data mining technologies. This is the only option, and it's a rock and a hard place, because it requires lots of time and resources that maybe a lot of families don't have. But the key here has to also be sort of actual community sort of organizing and developing, right? So in other words, if you can find enough families, like-minded individuals that can kind of share the load, and sort of put your brains together, there's all sorts of curriculums that you can find that are not licensed by a company and are not federally controlled, that you could use as a guide, and you can sort of, again, find out who's good at which discipline. And that's the hardest route to go, but it's the only one that escapes the public and the private combination of the corporate technocratic system.
So this is, is I would just say again, we can see this kind of formula. We've seen this before. Just because this option looks good out on the outside doesn't mean that it's the only one we have. We do have a captured school system. We have to figure out what to do about this. Posse, you had said that you thought that if this is something that John is saying, we should be second guessing this and not necessarily diving into this. Can we? What other options do we have? I guess that's my question. Is what if not?
What is the solution?
What is the solution?
Yeah.
I mean, it's ultimately it comes down to basically building parallel structures, right? I mean, along those lines of this parallel economy that comes down to, again, organizing locally into pods, into co-ops. And a lot of people have done this already. I mean, maybe there's a way that, if you know somebody that's gotten something like this off the ground locally, maybe you can come up with sort of a model or sort of an outline, like how did you put it together? And then you can sort of create a listserv, and then other people can sort of, borrow these ideas. But sort of it ultimately needs to be sort of an open source, organic, parallel structured system. And as far as technology goes, I'm not saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be only paper and pen, but I say, the more analog, the better. I mean, just in terms of technology, there's lots of ways that you can use open source or free software, everything from your operating system to your hardware to the software, et cetera, right? So Raspberry Pis for your hardware, and GNU Linux for your operating system, and other sorts of open or free software to facilitate, word processing and obviously internet research. So there's ways that we can use the technology, and even, video conferencing, ideally with some sort of a platform that is either minimally invasive in terms of data mining or is otherwise encrypted in ways that the data can't be tracked, to help basically build the AI system that's sort of, encroaching upon the corporate infrastructure. So, I mean, it's not a 5-point program, but I mean, these are the options that we have.
So why don't you elaborate a little bit more on the AI system that you talked about that's being implemented throughout our schools? We do have an article, I believe, in the doc you sent us, but what is going on with AI and how they're implementing it in schools, and how is it dangerous for society? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, the generative AI, you probably hear a lot about, the worries about students using it to cheat or whatever. I mean, that was sort of the first, big public story about GPT in schools. Oh, the students are going to use it and cheat and all this stuff. And so I've been getting emails, these workshops that they want me to go to, where they don't just want to teach you how to check to make sure they're not cheating, but it's like, but here's some other good ways to integrate it. And some of these include, they actually have them for grading. And so there's a few that were designed for grading writing. So you have one called Writable. This is with OpenAI. You have another one called Quill that's funded by Google and the Gates Foundation. And basically what they can do is they can score and provide automated feedback. And then you have other GPT AI that could basically sort of facilitate tutoring. Okay. And I'm actually thinking that my virtual video conferencing tutoring job is probably not going to be around a whole lot longer, just because
of AI.
Yeah, because, let's put it this way. All right. I get paid to log in for however many hours, and I get paid whether or not somebody makes an appointment. All right. And so I'm sitting there oftentimes with, several appointments left empty. And they could get a GPT AI to basically spit out, quick automated boilerplate politically correct responses that could get the student sort of on track to meet the task that's embedded in the federal curriculum. Well, they don't necessarily need a tutor to engage the student. A good tutor uses a lot of questioning techniques, indirect and questioning techniques that sort of prompt the student to sort of come to the understanding of what needs to be done on their own, right? A good tutor, the cliche is the pencil is in the student's hand, right? I'm not telling them what to do. I'm not moving the pencil for them, right? So a good tutor should be able to sort of spark some sort of creative thinking, right? Some sort of original thought, help them to think outside of the box. But in terms of, the federal government, the corporate public-private system, right, this is all ingrained in what's called outcomes-based education. So, right, they have outcomes for the students, sometimes called competencies that they want the student to achieve. And these competencies are designed for global citizenship. So a bunch of them are social emotional learning stuff. It's basically all the woke stuff, the critical theory stuff. It's adopting the appropriate identity politics categories that create a frictionless workforce system. And then the others have to do with whatever workforce skills are needed to fulfill the outcomes for the planned economy. Okay. And so in these ways, all they really need the GPT to do is to, provide enough information to the student so that they can meet that task. They don't necessarily, the GPT could rather effectively prompt the student or sort of condition them in how to think or what to think rather, as opposed to a good tutor who would sort of help the student cultivate the art of how to think right on their own.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's crazy.
Sounds like we're getting rid of teachers eventually altogether with this technology. This is horrible. I mean, this is every industry. We talk about this on the show. We talk about every industry suffering. We see it first here in Hollywood. We see it first with our movie sets, and then we've been striking for the last year. And you guys know that we've been. It's obviously it's going to go into all the other ones. What you just described, John, that sounds awful to me. That sounds awful. Like we don't have any solution to this in any of these industries we've looked into. I don't know if you've looked into what that would be on your side, but it sounds like it starts with the tutors, and then it's just the teachers all together, and you just have this formula. And like you said, it's like federally approved formula. That's all. Everything is worked out in advance, and there's just the blueprint, just enough to keep the child at the exact place they need to be. Forget the human connection is over. It's done. There's just that blueprint. Everything is just cookie cutter. That's where we are. Is that where we're going?
Well, wait. Another question tagged on to where we're going. How do you use AI in a productive way, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not real AI just yet, right? It's not learning on its own. It's an algorithm planned. It's more used. It's weaponized. Like AI for us in this space. There's AI that's listening to everything we're saying. Oh, it's picking up Johnny Klyczek's voice. Suppress, suppress, suppress. We don't want people to know about school board order. That it's being used in a negative way. But the other day, I was looking up because I needed to know information about what the laws were in a California superior court system. I was able to type that in and get that up really quickly. I was able to use it as a great resource. How could AI be used in a good way? And then also answer the question as far as Matt, is that where we're headed right now, where you won't have a job probably next week as the AI is taking it over? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll piggyback on what some of the teachers mentioned that are using it. Okay. And they say, so the positive, and this is how they've always promoted the adaptive learning courseware, which is sort of the precursor to this GPT AI for education. And that is, the first one is personalized learning and automated feedback, instantaneous feedback, right? So instead of a student having to, wait in line for raising the hand in a group setting, right? The students working on their task, and immediately, right, the AI is telling them there's a grammar error or something like that, and they don't have to wait to turn the paper in or wait to ask a question and then or have the teacher grade it and then provide it. And so the idea here is that the students can get more feedback quicker. All right. And it's going to be more individualized because it's eventually going to develop sort of an algorithm for how the student thinks, right? Its strength, the student's strength and weaknesses based on the psychometric data mining. All right. And so, I mean, those could be useful features. Okay. But the thing here is that in the instance of, so some of the teachers say, well, I let the AI give the students the feedback, and then I check the feedback to make sure that the feedback is good. Okay, now, so you're checking to make sure that the AI is on task and on target. But if you're only checking the feedback, then you're not checking where maybe the AI was supposed to give feedback and didn't. So in other words, the only way to actually holistically give feedback, appropriate feedback that you can be sure of as an instructor, is to read the paper, right? That's like, you have to, right? I mean, in one way or another, I'll note this, right? You're wanting some silver lining here, or you don't want me to overly blackmail everybody, which is what I tend to do because I'm focused on all the horrors of this whole system. So there are some union concerns from the AFG and the California Federation of Teachers. So one of the concerns is that, in other words, there is some awareness of this, and hopefully through some collective bargaining, maybe some of the worst features of this can either be, weeded out or otherwise held off. And some of the concerns they have that they want to sort of get into their bargaining contracts include if the teacher now has the AI doing most of the feedback, and that means that, well, you have more time now as a teacher. So does that mean the classrooms would get bigger? Would they add additional workloads, things like that? Is there an automation bias, right? In other words, I sort of alluded to that in my explanation of, right, you're checking the feedback, but, right, how much of it are you really checking, right? In order for this thing to sort of streamline your work, you have to kind of just trust it to a certain degree, right? Because if you check everything it does and everything it may or may not have done, right? I mean, you might as well just read it on your own. And the other concerns have to do with student privacy. This has to do with the data mining, and then also environmental concerns in terms of, right, all the energy that's going to be produced and sort of the electronic wastes. But the problem, again, with the automated feedback is that in order for it to do this, in order for it to sort of learn your strengths and weaknesses and your learning curve and be able to prompt you efficiently and effectively, or to know when to remediate, or to know when to give the student a harder task, it has to necessarily data mine the student, right? It necessarily has to take those psychometrics, right? And so, it's only one step removed from there where those psychometrics are funneled into the broader social credit infrastructure. So, for all the positive features that the system could potentially have, I'm not sure that those positive features necessarily outweigh the negative. Now, you did
wait until that stuff. You just wait until that AI learns for real, right? Like Matrix style, and says, all right, we know what the problem is. It's humans as is. It ain't even at that point. It's just algorithms programmed and weaponized by those who are controlling that AI right now to eliminate people like yourself, to eliminate everybody else. And even though there are some positives for research,
and we're doing a thing called, we're creating, in the WEF, they love talking about this, we're creating a useless class. I think that's the step before we get to James Cameron Terminator 2. I think it's the useless class is created, and then from there, then it's like, we don't need these people anymore. But this is,
we're to get rid of them that
little
way.
by little in every industry.
Well, you noted, I mean, you mentioned is like, look, I thought about this before I started writing my book. So before I started writing my book, I was working for an online tutoring company. And one day they tell us that IBM's Watson was going to co-pilot with us. And this was an AI program before GPT was sort of the representation of all things AI. And So this is before Trump got in office, and I'm thinking like, okay, so in other words, this thing's data mining how I tutor so that it can essentially replace me. So every day that I work, I'm building this, it's sort of the inverse of what Marx said about, the capitalists sort of digging their own graves with their oppression. It's sort of the opposite way around. And basically, if you think about it, if you take it to its logical extreme, which if you just keep following the thread, and this is what's going through my mind many years ago. Look, most people are worried about the automation of when we think of automation replacing much of the workforce, most people probably think of robotics in a factory setting. Oh, it's going to get rid of, all the dangerous jobs, and the heavy lifting and the tedious, monotonous tasks and all that type of stuff. But if we're talking tutoring or teaching, we're talking about intellectual labor. We're not talking about physical labor, right? And if the GPT or the AI can tutor or teach the student more effectively than a human being, then not only is the teacher replaced, but effectively the student is basically replaced or is obsolete as well, because anything the AI can teach the student to do, it could do it better on its own, whether intellectually or physically. And so, I don't know how you build these systems and you can't see that end game or that ending trajectory, right? I mean, in terms of the people on the other end of the engineering and that are installing all this stuff. And the reason I say that is I have a hard time thinking that that's not the intent, right? Like if you know that that's where it's going to end and you move towards it anyways, then I can't think of any other outcome than that you're doing this on purpose. And this is essentially the goal.
It seems to be. Yeah. There's no other way to see it at this point. I mean, I look back on my childhood and I think, man, back in the day, Back to the Future, we thought, how great would it be to have time travel? And then Doc Brown would say, you got to be careful. We have to he says, we have to destroy the time machine, Marty. We have to destroy it because it could get into the wrong hands and then it could destroy the fabric of the entire universe. Looking back, it's not that it could get in the wrong hands. Doc Brown was absolutely right, but go a step further. It will get into the wrong hands because it was created for that purpose, to destroy the fabric of the universe. I think that's the adult version, the adult realization I'm having now, that it was on purpose to do bad. And so we have to destroy the time machine, I think is the lesson here.
I think also the lesson, and I think we should end the show talking a little bit about MMA, where our guys here, would you say that the Biff of MMA is definitely Sean Strickland? Would he be the Biff of UFC? I think we can agree on that.
I haven't seen the Back to the Future in long enough for me to say. So
but we're not going to go after Sean Strickland.
Yeah.
So
Biff is like the Trump character, right? Because he's the guy yeah,
I remember he was very mean to Marty, and then I guess in the future he ends up running the company or some. Am I right or am I?
Well, he has access to the the Biff Tower thing, but it's been a while. Go study up on your Back to the Future because we're heading there. We're heading to that alternate 1985 where everything has gone to shit, and then I think the James Cameron, the Terminator 2 would be the next step. And then it's the Matrix. Is that the final? I think Posse, you mentioned the Matrix. That's the final step.
I think so. Go ahead, John.
Well, there's one. I mean, so you sort of mentioned Terminator and sort of like the military level AI. This is something that's worth looking at. So the RAND Corporation has been very much. I don't know how good you can see that. Charter schools. Okay. This is 1994. Here's another one. Okay. And then here's another one on school decentralization. All right.
So the RAND Corporation's investing in this.
Yes. They've been for quite a long time now. Right. And, when I mentioned the whole outcomes-based education system, that ties in with something called PPBS, another RAND Corporation creation. It's planning, programming, and budgeting systems. And it's basically a method for centralized planning. It was started for the military, but then they outsourced it to all the other departments, including the Department of Education. And so you just take your national security outcomes, you integrate them with your economic outcomes, and then you integrate them with the education outcomes, so that you're conditioning the students to fulfill the outcomes for not just the workforce, but and also the military, essentially, and there's a whole the entire system of basically cybernetics. All of this comes around the same time in the 50s, right? So the RAND Corporation's PPBS systems, the Macy's Cybernetics conferences, and then you had something like scenario planning. All of this came out of the RAND Corporation, various people like someone like Herman Kahn, who was high level up. And there's several scenario planning documents that look at scenario planning for charter schools. And one of them involves a person by the name of Paul Hill from the RAND Corporation. So, I mean, it's deeply embedded with the military, and sort of one of the bills, or one of that got that sort of integrates it, is the National Defense Education Act, again under Dwight D. Eisenhower. All this stuff coming out of the 50s, right? We're just now sort of seeing the theoretical aspects of the PPBS, the scenario planning, and tied in with the school choice decentralization movement, and now sort of the culmination of AI, right? Sort of the Moore's law. We finally got to the point where our transistors and our AI is sophisticated enough that we can sort of implement these ideas that came out of the RAND Corporation and the Macy's Cybernetics conferences in the 1950s.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack, a lot going on. Everybody, Johnny Klyczek is here. Professor, let everybody know where they can find you, where they can purchase your book, and then give me your top 3 fighters in the UFC pound for pound ranking 1, 2, 3.
All right, so let's see. Schoolworldorder.info is the website. That's where you can get all my social media. You can get a link to the book at Trine Day. Obviously, you can get the book, School World Order. You can get it at Amazon as well, but always better to go to Trine Day. I'm Taoist Professor on Twitter. Taoist Professor, Taoist with a T, Taoist Professor on Twitter, and also on Telegram. And then School World Order YouTube, School World Order BitChute, or the channels. As far as who would I say is pound for pound, we're talking all time greats, or we're talking
right now active 1, 2, 3.
I don't follow it. Well, I don't follow it like I used to. Let me just see off the top of my head. Well, I was just gonna say, so John Jones, GSP, and maybe Anderson Silva for all-time greats.
Wow.
That's what I would say.
Leaving Habib out of that. Wow.
Yeah, well, I'm a stand-up guy, so I'm biased. I like I'm a stand-up guy that I had, I got a black belt in Taekwondo, and I've got a instructor's certificate in Muay Thai. So I like not only like stand-up, but I like a lot of artistic kicking, right? I like the fancy.
Let me give you my 3, 2, 1. Number 3, I got Zhang Weili, right? So she's the number 3 pound for pound best fighter in the world. Number 2, I got John Jones. I'm still going to give him that because he really hasn't lost. I guess the steroids and the cocaine popping positive kind of have removed him from number 1. But number 1, I got Islam Makhachev, number 1 pound for pound fighter right now. After what he did with Volkanovski, whatever he did the other day too, Dustin Poirier, I got him as the number 1 guy. That's my 3, 2, 1 right there. But when it comes to my number 1 source for what's going on in the schools today, you're my number 1 pound for pound guy on the streets. So thank you so much, Johnny Klyczek, for coming on over today.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, John. Appreciate
Let's get together soon. Let's go hang out. Tennessee was awesome. We got to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, she thinks she's having something in August. Maybe I'll see you there. And if you're in Chicago, man, you got a place to stay.
Well, Chicago, I'm coming up for the DNC in a couple months, so let me hit you up on that. The protest will be crazy in the streets, so maybe we can get together then for sure.
Well, definitely. I'll definitely come up and meet you up there.
Definitely. Johnny Klyczek, everybody. School World Order. Go check it out. Go buy the book. Get it right now. Get yourself informed and stay the hell away from AI. Thank you, Johnny.